Welcome back to the Circuit Revival, where today we're going to take a look at this AXUS keyboard. So it's a USB-C / battery powered keyboard. I've tested it with the batteries, it doesn't work. So we'll just test whether it powers by the USB-C, but apparently it is a no power. But what we'll do to begin with, just to double check, is we'll just have a look into the USB-C port itself, just to make sure it's not damaged or shorting anything out. And then if not, we'll plug something in. So if we just go to the microscope, just here. Here is the USB-C port. And if I'm being honest, I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't see any pins. It just looks all right. So what we can do is come back over to the main screen. And here we are. So we'll try plug it in via USB-C and see whether we get anything. So we get absolutely nothing. So that's plugged in. What we should see if anything was happening was something up on the screen here. So the fact that we get nothing up here is evidence that we have nothing. So we're not getting any amp draw whatsoever. Feels a little loose, but nothing sort of stand out there. So we'll just get this apart. So it looks like it's just a bunch of Phillips screws. Okay, they are different lengths by the looks of things. So we've got a long one in the middle here and a long one next to it. Yeah, I think that's all of them. If this just comes apart. Yep, so it just separates out. We'll flip this over. Okay, so we've got a ribbon cable that connects the two together, so we can get that unplugged. The lead to the speaker. That's the speaker unplugged. And that connector. And then we've got a big one that connects down to the keyboard itself. So we'll see if we can get that one out as well. Okay, there's that out. It was just a bit stiff. And that brings us just down to the two separate boards. So we'll put this part off to the side for now. And we'll see what the actual sort of power side looks like. So this is where the power comes in. So we'll start just by having a look around it. As always, we'll start with a visual inspection. So let's just pull this under the scope. And here we are. So this is the main power board. And just not unsure whether something on that 0 ohm resistor there. Is there anything here? Or is this just... It's like just a bit of dirt. We'll just look around and see if anything stands out. Okay, nothing immediately stands out there visually. Let's just check the pins on the USB. Okay, they're all good. So next thing we'll test is all of the fuses. Okay, so we're in continuity mode, which is the mode that beeps when we have a complete circuit, like so. And we'll just work our way around this, testing these. So, okay, it looks like, nope, that's all good. So we'll do the next one. All good. 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 Okay, so it doesn't look like we have any problems there. So what we'll do now that we've taken the other board off, let's just try to plug it in again and see if we get anything different, whether it's the other board that's putting the fault on. Okay, that's plugged in and we have absolutely nothing different there. So let's plug this in and see if we're getting 5 volts into the board. So we'll go back into voltage DC and we'll go on either side of this port because it looks like that's how it's going to be. Power on one side and the other on the other side. So if we go just here and here, so we have nothing there. How about there? Nothing between there and there. Nothing. So that doesn't feel like it's even getting into the board. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to unscrew this board and then try plug it in because I don't know whether maybe my cable just can't quite reach. So let's get this board out and see whether we get anything different. And there was nothing underneath. So let's try just plug straight into here like so. And we still get absolutely nothing. Let's try unplug the battery contacts. And nothing. So what we might do then is let's see whether if we inject power into this board if it does anything. So we can start by just getting rid of the rest of this. Let's just double check whether there's a short on the main power rail. So we'll go continuity and we'll go between these two. So there's not a short on the two battery terminals there. So just to double check. Positive was at the bottom. So let's try put 5 volts into this. So I'm going to bring the voltage down slightly to begin with. I'm just going to start with like 3 volts. No, actually we'll go down to 1 and we'll build it up just in case, but it should be good for 5 volts. So positive at the bottom, negative at the top. We get absolutely nothing there. Bring this up to 3.5. Still nothing. And 5 volts. Still absolutely nothing. Have a slightly closer look around. Just checking the solder joints on that battery terminal just in case. They look absolutely fine. So it could be that it needs to be plugged into the rest of the board to draw or anything, but that just seems, you know, it doesn't seem right to me. I feel like it would draw something even without that, but I don't know. We can try plug it into the rest of the board and double check. Just test these diodes. If we go this way. .5 and then this way on this one, which should be the reverse. Nothing, that's good. We'll flip these around and try the other way. Nothing, and then we should get 0.5. 0.5, yeah, okay, so they seem good. Okay, this resistor doesn't look a normal color. Let's just have a look at what that's reading. So it should be 22 and then 20, so I think that's 2200. And that's reading right. Okay, I think we'd have something show up a bit differently if it was a short on a capacitor, but let's just test the capacitors for shorts. Nope, no shorts on the capacitors either. Okay, nothing on this stands out. Be interested to see what this chip is here, in case it's maybe like a software issue. Okay, I'm just going to plug this back into the rest of the board and see whether we get anything different happen, just in case it does need to be plugged into the rest of it to function. But whilst we're here, we might as well just take a quick look at this board and see if anything stands out here. So this has got like a Raspberry Pi Pico type thing on it, which I imagine is what does sort of all the heavy lifting side of things. Let's plug into this board then. And then we'll plug back into power and see if we get anything different. No, still nothing different there. big connector as well. So we get nothing at all. Okay, so let's try and see if we can find some information on some of the chips on here then. So there's not too much on the board here. So we have this chip here, the LTK 800 2D. This is an audio amplifier chip. This guy here is a voltage regulator. And then we've got a few other bits dotted around here. So nothing immediately jumps out at me wrong. So I'm just going to kind of prod around the board and see if I can come across anything. Okay, so I wouldn't say I'm too much closer, but I've certainly been doing a bit of digging around, and what I've done is I've put it all back together, and I've now tried to apply voltage directly to the main board, and hopefully here you can see the lights are on. So clearly it is an issue between this board and this board. But what that is, I can't quite work out yet. So we're slowly getting there, I hope. But I've got a slightly better idea. I know that everything on this side should be okay, I think, because it's directly applying power does turn it all on. It's just an issue between the small board and this main board. So it could still be one of these ribbon cables. I do a bit more digging, but we're getting there. Okay, so I've done a bit of fiddling around. I don't know quite how I'm going to edit this together, so I don't really know where we are in terms of this, but I've taken it apart a bit more so I can test it. So this is the front panel. I've taken it out of the case, and I was basically just tracing voltages around, and I kept getting kind of to a place where I thought I found the issue, but then turns out it wasn't that. So I've now resorted to coming in via the battery terminals instead, and I've got my power supply connected on the negative and the positive. The black lead here is just so that I can use my meter to probe around. I was basically trying to follow the voltages forwards and then backwards, try and work out the point it dropped off. And I think I finally found something. So if I turn my power supply back on, so this is putting 5 volts into the battery terminals, which will work. And basically, if you look up in the top left up here, we should be able to see the voltage. And you see currently there's nothing there. But if I wiggle this, it goes up to 5 volts. And if I sort of wiggle it back, it's gone again. So that is the sort of like straight from the battery terminals. So you see sort of a bit hit and miss. And basically when the voltage is there, if I take this, which is just what kind of shorts out the contacts for the power, it turns on. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's currently on there. And then I think if I take this and just touch some of the other buttons, it'll go. So you can see it's then dropped out there. So I think this is because there's obviously something wrong with the connections to the battery. So there it is. Hopefully you can see that. I'll try and cover this a bit. There you can see zeros, and if I just touch one of these random buttons down here, you can see it's now changed to 77. So I think the problem might be around where the battery terminal is slightly. So I'm just going to turn the power supply off, get this unplugged, and it's either, I'm guessing, an issue with the cables themselves or an issue with the solder on the board. So we'll test the cables first of all and work out whether we have kind of an continuity from the end of the cable down to the beginning. Now I'm not saying this will necessarily fix the USB side of things, but I don't know whether maybe it runs up to where the battery terminals are first and then it cuts out somehow, because obviously you don't want the USB running into the batteries to charge them, but there might be something in the circuit I don't really understand. So we'll take our probes and we'll just start with the red side, so hopefully, or the black side, sorry. If we go into here, go into continuity, and then if we go down to the black and we wiggle it around, that seems pretty there. Go to the red and then to this end. Okay, so you can hear that is a bit temperamental, so I don't know whether there's a break in the wire somewhere. So we'll just try and see if we can work out whether this is a break in the wire or maybe just a bad connection inside. It definitely seems like it is wire side. So we'll come in with the microscope and just see if we can see a bit closer the connection to the actual board. because I guess it does look a bit iffy. So if we go to the microscope, okay, so here we are just under the scope, and that's the end connected to the actual board itself. And I guess that doesn't look too great, so we'll try reflow that to begin with, and then we'll test it again. But I imagine the problem is probably inside the wire somewhere. I think we might just need to possibly recut the wire. I'll just come in with some more solder and just try and see if we can reflow this. And to be honest, that does feel a bit loose. There's every chance that is just a bad connection down this end. So let's try and flood this. Yeah, that feels pretty tight now. Let's just test continuity again. I'll come in the top end and then down to the bottom. It's still a bit loose, so I feel like it must be something inside the actual connector end here. So we'll just pop out the red crimp. I think if we just come in and push this down, it should pop out. Okay, we're out. Check the crimp on this. Okay, to be honest, doesn't look awful, but it doesn't look great. Let's just test the continuity then. So I'm going to put one of my probes just hanging around inside the battery terminal down here. Should be touching the base end, and then okay, so to be honest, that seems all fine there. And let's see if we can see any difference in the two ends. We know that the black end is alright. And the gap is a bit bigger on the red one. So maybe we just try and clamp it down a bit more. If I take these pliers, we'll just try and squeeze this in a bit. Okay, that's going to be very tight. Hopefully we can still fit it in. Okay, they're both connected. So let's bring the board back round. Plug our battery back in. Now what I'm going to do, just to be certain, is I'm going to flood the connections on the board as well with solder, just to make sure, in case the connection issue is on the board side. Let's plug our battery terminal back in again. Okay, that is stiff now, so that's definitely making a connection. And let's reattach our crocodile clips. Okay, do we power on still? Yes. So we're on, and it's definitely a lot more sturdy. So we know that that side works. So let's try now and see if we unplug the power supply from the battery terminals and go back to our 5 volts. We'll leave that still plugged in and see whether this works now. So we're plugged into the 5 volts, and yes. Okay, that's on, and you can hopefully see in the top here that it's pulling amperage. So that's on. So it looks like the issue was just a connection to the battery terminals, which I don't really understand how that works. So if anyone can tell me, because I thought when the USB was plugged in, it would bypass the battery so that it didn't short itself, so it didn't charge up the batteries. So let's get this back together and see it working. Okay, so we're all back together here. So let's give this a test again and make sure it still works. So we will plug our USB-C in and press the power button. We have power. And it works, and it comes with apparently every single instrument you'd ever want. Piano, keys, violin, trumpet, flute, guitar, xylophone, synth, bongo, and dog. So let's try dog. there we have it. Nice, easy fix. Sometimes it is the simple things, so double check the simple things first before you go overboard like I did there. But amazing, there's another one. So let's increase our counter from 22 to 23. Amazing. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.